Splodge, written and told by Kiefer Adams. Sir Topham Hatt came up to Edward the Blue Engine with a great smile on his face. "It's time that I needed a holiday, Edward," he declared. "Me and Lady Hatt wish to see the children on the mainland. If you're looking for an engine to take you there, I am more than happy to," offered Edward. Sir Topham Hatt beamed. But Edward was worried. "What about my work?" he asked. "Don't you worry, Edward," said Sir Topham Hatt. "I've taken care of everything. I've ordered 2 diesels from the other railway. They'll do your work until you return." Edward was very relieved, and went to fetch the special coach he would take Sir Topham and Lady Hatt to see their grandchildren. As the Hatts boarded his carriage, Edward glanced over to the yard. The 2 diesels looked very unfriendly. They were both a dark shade of grey, but one had purple markings all around him, the other had a sort of dark lime colour. Splatter and Dodge snarled at the old engine. Edward didn't feel very convinced that these diesels were going to be doing his work. Sir Topham waved his hat out of the window, and Edward set nervously for the mainland. "I hope things are all right when I come back," he thought to himself. Splatter and Dodge watched as Edward was out of sight. "Well, that's one puffball to worry about," observed Splatter. "Do you think the boss will want to know?" asked Dodge. "Of course he'll want to know. One puffball out of the way will be more of a delight for him." The 2 diesels revved their engines to find Diesel 10, who had also arrived on the railway. Things were not going to be pleasant for Sir Topham Hatt's engines now that Edward was gone. Later, Thomas met Percy at the water tower. Percy had been worrying non-stop since Edward had left. "I hope he comes back soon," he whimpered. "Don't worry, Percy," soothed Thomas. "Edward will be home soon. He's not gone forever." "I don't like that new diesel either," Percy shivered. "The one with the big claw on his roof." "Oh, don't worry about him," said Thomas. "I'll be fetching Mr. Conductor soon. Sir Topham Hatt knows him from a faraway place. Mr. Conductor will be looking after us until Sir Topham comes back." Percy did feel a little relieved, but he wasn't sure if Mr. Conductor would look after the engines. Thomas puffed away to drop off Annie and Clarabel at the carriage sheds before he set off to fetch Mr. Conductor. During his stay on Sodor, Mr. Conductor was faced with a serious crisis. His supply of gold dust, which had allowed him to travel from his home of Shining Time, was running low. While he was searching for clues to unlock the source, Diesel 10 was getting more dangerous by the minute. Even Splatter and Dodge were starting to fear him. But while the steam engines did their best to avoid him, George the Steamroller, on the other hand, was one of the few residents of Sodor to stand up to Diesel 10. He watched while tarmacking a road as Diesel 10 went against a truck and picked up some metal strips in his claw. "Oi, mate, put those down," George roared. "And what exactly are you going to do if I don't?" Diesel 10 hissed. "You don't put them down right now, you're going to get steamed," roared George. Diesel 10 hesitated at first, but then, before George realised it, he had chucked the metal strips right at the roller. Luckily, they all missed him. "You better be lucky that I don't see you again," Diesel 10 threatened. "You and all those puffballs will be history when I find those buffers and that lost engine." He rumbled away, leaving a rather shaken-up George behind. A day or 2 later, George was trundling down the lane. He saw Splatter and Dodge up ahead. The diesels quivered with fear. "What's up with you 2? asked George. "The boss was so horrible to us," said Splatter. "All we did was find the buffers," cried Dodge. "What are you talking about?" asked George. Diesel 10 wants to go after the lost engine, Splatter whimpered. He called us morons, nincompoops, nitwits, Dodge stuttered. Then why do you work for him? Asked George. I don't get on with these steam engines, but there are some diesels I don't like either, and that claw-mounted nutcase is certainly one of them. You have the right to say no, you know. Splatter and Dodge were hesitant. Take it from me, said George. Those steam engines will suffer because of that boss of yours. Before the diesels could say anything else, George had rumbled away. They were left with a very uneasy mind. Splatter and Dodge did manage to stand up to Diesel 10 when the lost engine, Lady, returned to Sodor, with Thomas following suit. They laughed with delight when they learned that Diesel 10 had fallen off the Big Dipper, the largest viaduct on Sodor, and had fallen into a garbage barge. To them, it was the best thing that had happened since they came to the railway. A week or so later, Edward returned from the mainland. Toby, Henry and Percy told him everything that had happened. Splatter and Dodge were a bit, troublesome, said Percy, but when they stood up to Diesel 10, we had newfound respect for them. They couldn't wait to get back to the mainland quick enough, said Toby. They felt like they were safer there than here. And you should have seen the lost engine, observed Henry. The most beautiful engine we've ever seen. Edward gave a warm smile. Oh, I know about the lost engine, he said. But before the others could ask, Edward had backed into the shed and had gone to sleep. Somehow, Edward knew all too well what had happened while he had been away.